and welcome to our session on practical OT strategies for kids in pain, thriving at home, school, and beyond. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we are right now. I'm coming to you from the lands of the Gayamagal people and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. A little bit about me. I'm Michelle O'Sullivan, and I've been working as an occupational therapist for about 16 years. And I actually became an OT to work with children who were living with chronic conditions, including chronic pain. Now, you might be thinking, why does someone who's just left high school want to do that? Well, the answer is my own lived experience. I grew up living with pain from around the age of 10. At the time, we didn't know that I have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but I had recurring injuries. I had my first surgery when I was 12 and 4 in total during high school. I lived for many years with complex regional pain syndrome, or CRPS. I still live with pain. And I want to make that choice of words quite obvious. I live with pain. And the reason that I wanted to work as an occupational therapist or in healthcare was because I felt as a young person that my life would have been easier and less scary and more enjoyable if I'd had access to health professionals who had lived experience of pain. Don't get me wrong, I had the most amazing physiotherapists and doctors who supported me through my pain journey. But at the end of the day, none of them really knew what it was like to experience what I was experiencing. And that really had a profound impact on me. And here I am, 30 years down the road from when my pain began, talking to you. Let's just have a look at our session flow for those who would like to know a little bit about what's happening in advance. So we're going to look at the role of OT in chronic pain. We're going to look at the daily life and functioning areas. We're going to look at pacing, energy, and participation, and also a bit about pain-informed practice and family-centered approaches. So let's get into it. Occupational therapy is a very misunderstood profession, and who wouldn't be confused when we talk about occupation and children in the same sentence? But the easiest way to understand occupational therapy is to think about it being about the things that we do to occupy our time. So traditionally for children, we would think about the main occupations of childhood being developing friendships, playing, learning, or being a student. And I guess it's important to note that there's many different types of learning. For example, learning how to do our activities of daily living, like brushing our teeth. Then there's more the academic focused learning. And then there's also skills like communication, and they're just examples. As occupational therapists, we see people as whole people. So I see your child as a whole child. I don't see pain or a sore knee or their anxiety. I see a human young person who's living in a physical body inside the context of a family or support system. And I see a young person who needs to do things and a young person who wants to do things to participate and engage in the world around them. So we have a physical body that moves and interacts with the world. We have a brain or a mind that thinks and processes. And we have affect or emotions and feelings that make us human. And I also know that each of us has a spirit or a soul kind of part of us, that life force that keeps us here. And that can look very different for every single person. It's really important for us to think about and address how any other factors like pain or anxiety or cultural norms or the sensory environment impacts on the person's life force. It's a big part of us, and it's actually an area that many other professions don't address. So, as an occupational therapist, I'm really interested in what it is that your child wants and needs to do, and how we together can make that happen. OTs work in collaboration. So you're not doing all of this navigating on your own. You don't have to try and work this all out on your own. But what might that look like? So as OTs, we like to consider ourselves professional problem solvers. We look at all the ways that we can change the task or activity, the environment, the expectation, the person factors, and then we also explore aids or devices that can assist with independence so that we can enable engagement and participation. That's what it's all about. One of the greatest skills that OTs have is task analysis. So we can watch someone do a task and break it down into all of its parts and work out where the challenges might be, where the strengths are, and what needs to be modified to make it more possible. Then we can teach the individual skills where possible or use compensatory strategies if needed. So let's just have a quick look using the example of a button down shirt. We might look at the ways we can change the task itself. So, what if we swapped the shirt from a button down one to one that you pull over your head? What if we changed the expectations of everyone involved? Perhaps the child does or tries to do the bottom buttons because they're easier, and the adult does the remaining ones while we're still learning. What if we change the environment where the task is taking place? What if we moved it to another room that was more suitable? Perhaps one that has a mirror so we can help with visualizing what's happening with those buttons, or somewhere with better light or less noise, or without the TV as a distraction. Lots of possibilities. And what if we worked on some of those person factors like building fine motor strength and dexterity? So that's coordination, so that we can have more chance of buttoning independently in the future. And then sometimes we have to look at some low cost assistive technology to help with buttoning. So, like this button hook. Or what if we change the buttons to hidden press studs or Velcro so that the other kids didn't even know? It's the science and art of OT that helps guide us to where those changes need to happen. OT for kids in pain is very much about helping kids join in. And we do that by tapping into the kids' strengths, helping families find fun activities to learn new skills. We do a lot of playing and Embedding practice opportunities within daily routines and activities. We don't want to add more to your load if we can help it. We also work together on fostering the ability to listen to their body. OTs have lots of strategies for doing this type of work. And we also encourage pacing and the taking of breaks. And really importantly, reminding them of the strengths and the things that they can do. I can't stress this enough. It's so important that we remind them of the things that they're doing really well. And then there's so much more we can do as well. So, how do we balance encouraging independence while respecting a child's pain and their limitations? So, I like to think about these top 5 things. So, we want to involve the child or young person in meaningful goal setting. So, the goal has to be meaningful to them, or it's not going to be motivating. So, that might be something like, I want to be able to ride my bike, or I want to be able to sleep over at a friend's house. So, it's something that's meaningful to them. And then we also have to acknowledge and praise the desire to become independent, even if they can't do everything by themselves yet. You might be thinking or saying something like, it's so great that you want to give that a go. I'm here to help, but only if you need it. Or, I love that you tried to do that on your own today. I hope you're proud of yourself for doing that. We also want to encourage engagement in the tasks and processes. So there's usually parts of a task or process that a young person can do. So, for example, let's say cooking or following a recipe, they may be able to get the ingredients out of the cupboard for the recipe, and they may be able to read the instructions, but not actually cook it themselves yet. Or they may be able to get their clothes out of their drawers, but they need help getting them on. So you might start asking, hey, out of all the steps involved here, which one do you think that you might be able to try doing yourself? We also want to validate the struggles. They are so real and they need validating. It's going to be frustrating and disappointing at times, and we need to acknowledge that. And we also need to think about generalization of skills. That's a little bit of OT speak. So, what does it mean? Simply put, it means being able to use a skill in a wide variety of situations and activities beyond the activity where it was first learned. So, for example, using scissors. If I can use scissors to cut paper, I might be able to use scissors to cut open a packet or help open a package that's been delivered in the mail, or even use scissors to cut up food. So we want to generalize skills. And just a reminder that everything we do has to relate back to the goal that they've helped set. One of the things that I love most about OT is that even with small adjustments, we can have a huge impact on function. So let's use the example of handwriting. What if we change the task from handwriting to typing? Or if we made changes to the environment where we're asking the young person to do their writing, things like air conditioning, lighting, sound, more comfortable chairs. What if we could build strength and endurance through OT and physio so that they could maintain a better posture, or build fine motor skills so that handwriting was more possible, or change the pencil or pen, add a pencil grip, or use splints and joint supports to make writing more comfortable and more possible. And a big one, what if we change the expectations? So instead of 20 minutes of writing, what if we only expect 10 minutes? Or what if there were rest breaks that could happen? Or typing for some tasks and writing for others? Or in older years, extra time for exams, extra time for assignments if we're having trouble handing them in on time because there's been so much going on with appointments and pain and fatigue. Then there's always the homework versus no homework debate. And sitting still while learning, that's a whole other topic, all of its own, that I won't go into. But what if we actually had the freedom to move about or lie on the floor or stand instead of being having to sit all the time? So when we make small adjustments, engagement can be unlocked, which is amazing. All right, we're going to switch gears a little and talk about pacing, energy, and participation. Have a look at the screen and have a quick think about what you might know about these beautiful creatures that are on the screen. Is the person that you care for more like one of them than others in terms of their behaviors and their tendencies to nap or go and sleep? This is a typical cycle that we see in young people and adults who are overdoing things. People often describe it as doing all the things when they're feeling good and then paying the price later. And this can look different for everyone, but we generally see the following characteristics. So we engage in activities because we want or need to at a level that we're not really used to. So we're overspending our energy and maxing out our capacity. We might then start to feel pain increasing, fatigue increasing, and our activity level decreasing. We might need to rest more, and generally we're less active than we were recently. This leads us to feel the need for rest. And then prolonged rest might cause us to start noticing a depletion of energy, lower mood or poorer mental health, lower motivation, and overall we start losing some of our muscle strength and activity tolerance, which we call deconditioning. This leads us to underdoing. So we're not doing as much as we usually would. And sometimes it's really hard to do even our basic activities of daily living, like showering, eating, playing, or going to school. After a period of underdoing, which in many ways is like prolonged recovery, the pain that flared up from all the overdoing may start to decrease. Our energy might increase again, and we might start engaging in our activities again. When we re-engage, our mood might improve and we might want to do more. Does this sound familiar to you? Unfortunately, what we often see is that despite or even because of what we've just been through with all that pain and fatigue and the need to rest and not being able to participate, we get lured back into overdoing all over again, and the cycle continues. So when we look at that over time, we might see something like this. We see peaks and troughs, mountains and valleys of overdoing, underdoing, overdoing, underdoing, overdoing, underdoing. How do we help young people avoid this cycle of overdoing it on good days and crashing afterwards? We teach pacing. So, pacing is a strategy that we use to help people maintain or increase their activity levels when pain or fatigue is threatening to cause inactivity or already is. The goal of pacing is less peaks and troughs or mountains and valleys. So instead of going through this overdoing and underdoing cycle over and over and over again, we aim for a more paced level of activity. And that looks more like this bottom line. So there are little peaks and little troughs, but they're not these giant ones that we have to recover from all the time. I often say to kids, we're aiming for waves that we're happy to swim in, not waves that are great for surfing. Okay, so the swimmable ones, not the huge ones that you need a surfboard for. Now, pacing does feel counterintuitive. It's like asking a child to initially do less when they feel they can do more, so that in the future they can do more and for longer without continuing to repeat that cycle. And a warning, pacing is a long game. It's not something that happens overnight and generally not something that you feel the rewards of instantly, but it is worth the wait. And hot tip, it's always a work in progress. Even adults don't get it right 100% of the time. So, my top 4 keys to pacing: knowing warning signs and pain symptoms. We need to know those so that we know that we're maybe not pacing very well or that we might need to start resting or slowing down. We also need to know baseline capacity, so how much they can do without experiencing a flare up or an increase in pain. We need to understand expectations. So, what is the day going to look like so that I can ration my energy for the day? And also knowing what the expectations of the task are so we can plan things out. And the other important one is self compassion, because we're not going to get it right all the time, and that's okay. So when we think about warning signs, sometimes it's a bit like a ladder where there's this linear progression where it might progress from aching muscles to aching joints to sweaty palms to feeling nauseous to crying. But it may not always be linear. And it's important to note that all kids and adults will have their own warning signs, and we need to know what those are. Sometimes it's nothing like a warning signs ladder. It's much more like symptom soup. So sometimes it's a bit of fatigue, crying, aching joints, maybe a bit of nausea. And other times it's aching muscles and tearfulness and an increased sense of frustration. So it's all about learning about the young person's symptoms and signs so that we can acknowledge them and pick them up when we need to. At other times, you may as well have just put all of those signs and symptoms in a blender. Just there's no differentiating them at all. And sometimes this is all we see: a young person who's distressed, hurting, feeling unwell, who's showing low mood. We see signs of the emotions and affect rather than specifics about the symptoms. And this is a big clue for us that something isn't right for this young person. I think it's really important here to highlight that those who are neurodivergent may have more trouble communicating their pain to others, but it does not necessarily mean that they're not feeling pain, distress, or other emotions. And we can't always rely on observations because some people don't show their pain or distress in body language. It's crucial to realize or to remember that not everyone can articulate how they're feeling, especially those who struggle with interoception, so that interpreting of our internal body signals, or alexithymia, so difficulty describing their emotions. Sometimes we think if we get people to quantify their pain on a scale of 0 to 10, it might be easier, but that's not always the case. We know that pain scales, 0 to 10, or even FACES scales, don't mean much to some people, and that needs to be respected and worked with. In particular, it's been neurodivergent clients who have struggled with pain scaling because it's can be so much harder to match a feeling and a number. And this is just in my experience. I had one client who said that they just randomly select a seemingly arbitrary number because that's what's expected of her. And then the next time she does it again, but they're in no way related to each other because the selection process is totally random. That's clearly not a strategy that works for her. I often teach OTs that it's our job to help find a way for these things to be communicated. Being able to communicate pain and discomfort and illness can be life-saving. So we need to try and find a way. I have spent time with many clients over the years creating their own pain scale with words that they use to describe what's going on for them. For example, okay is 0, or meh is kind of middle of the road. Yucky, kind of getting around to 7 or an 8. And then very yucky is not good. Okay. For others, it's been more about what would feel helpful right now. For example, do you need an ice pack or a heat pack or a nap or some mild analgesia or a bath or a shower? And we might create visuals for those things using actual photos if necessary. The one thing that I would say that applies to every neurotype and age group is where possible, it's important to have a scale that can be used consistently between settings. So at home, school, with extended family, and to update that as body awareness and language develop over time. For those who are able to work with scales or colors like this body battery idea can be helpful, particularly for fatigue management. So green means that we have energy to use and can do what we want or need to do. Orange means that we need to slow down and rest and recharge for a little while to get back into that green zone. And red means we'll have to stop for a longer time until we can get back into the green zone. This isn't not really where we want to be. So whenever we kind of get into that orange zone, we need to start thinking about stopping and recharging so that we don't end up running out of energy for the rest of the day's activities. I also use this idea of the rule of 2, which is helpful for pacing for pain. It's really a way of managing activity-related pain, so pain that increases when we're doing more. It involves checking in before an activity to work out where the pain level is at before starting the task or activity. So let's use the example of going for a bike ride. So imagine that you are going out for a bike ride, and before you start, you check in with your body and you rate your pain as 2 out of 10. You then go and ride your bike, and while you're riding, you notice more pain. So you check in and you realize that it's now a 5 out of 10. The increase from 2 to 5 is an increase of 3 points. So it's more than two, which means that we should probably rest from bike riding and let the pain settle down. I like to say to young people, even though you experience pain more often than others, activity-related pain is still a warning system that must be listened to and respected. When a car alarm goes off, you usually have to do something to stop the alarm from sounding. Your body needs the same thing. You have to do something. And that something is actually making the choice to stop what you're doing and rest and do something different until it settles. Importantly, it doesn't mean never do it again. And it doesn't mean don't try other things. It means that right now, in this moment, your body is responding to what you're doing, the alarm's going off, and you need to stop for a bit. Getting back to doing is always our aim, because life is all about doing things we enjoy. So really, the rule of two helps you to know when to stop and when it's okay to keep going. What do we do when we have to stop because pain's increased by 2 or more, or we're just having a bad day? I always encourage families to have a pain management plan, one that's physically printed out and stuck on the fridge or notice board where it's easily accessible when things get tough. Sometimes when we're in lots of pain, or our child is in lots of pain and there's a lot of distress, we can struggle to think about anything else. The pain just gets so loud. So having something easily within reach is really helpful while we're trying to get the volume turned down on the pain. I encourage families to have something that lists the types of activities that young people can do when they're in pain in different settings. So this is just an example of a template I use. So we have quiet activities, things I can do in bed, and things I can do when I'm out. So things I can do in bed might be listening to an audiobook. All right. So I think that's really helpful. And we usually have a list of things that are suggestions. So an activity we can do is together in an OT session is working out which ones can be done where, and depending on pain levels and what else is going on. Okay, switching gears a little bit again. How do we bring schools and teachers on board with this idea of pacing and participation strategies? It's really important that we explain things to school. They're not just going to get it without an explanation. So I often say it's important to tell them about the why. So I'd say something like, let's say the child's name is Mia. In order for Mia to increase her participation in the long term, right now, we need to put some boundaries in around how and what she does. These aren't forever, and they're going to change as her body begins to tolerate more. And I always try and highlight that this is a life skill that we're teaching Mia as she learns to self-manage her condition. So it'd be really helpful if school could support Mia's pacing. We also talk about the consequences. So if we don't stick to these activity boundaries for Mia, her body will not be able to increase its tolerance. Her body might get stuck at this limited level of participation, or it may actually get worse. And this is absolutely not what we want, right? And then we talk about the techniques and strategies we're using. So to build tolerance, We need to limit the types of activities and the amount of time Mia participates in them. These will be amounts that really seem small, but the time will gradually increase as her body gets used to the demands. It's a slow process, but it has to be adhered to in order for there to be progress. And providing concrete examples and strategies is important too, but that will depend on each individual young person. I'd also encourage you to familiarise yourself with the disability standards for education to understand your child's rights and the responsibilities of the schooling system. Okay, pain-informed practice. What does it look like in OT? Pain-informed practice in OT integrates pain neuroscience, sensory processing and emotional processing, biomechanics, and social factors to understand how pain impacts a child's ability to perform their meaningful daily activities, so our occupations. I can't see your child's pain, but looking at how it impacts on their capacity to engage in their daily activities gives me a glimpse into it. Occupational therapists focus on function rather than just symptoms. So we use evidence-based strategies like activity pacing and environmental modifications, and self-management techniques to help people reduce pain. But we also do it to help improve participation and enhance their overall quality of life. And that's a big one, improving quality of life. Pain-informed practice is about helping young people feel more in control of their lives when they're living with pain. And it improves a child's sense of control by validating their experience and teaching them about pain and emotions, how their brain might be working to help them or make things harder for them. It also helps empower them through the development of self-management skills. So things like pacing, self-soothing, emotional regulation, mindfulness and stress reduction, exploring the possibility of exercise, learning to look after their health, and by helping them to set achievable goals for meaningful participation in daily life. So it's a bit like setting up their own playlist or toolkit of things that they can do and strategies they can use to help themselves. As OTs, we focus on enhancing engagement in valued occupations, which can help kids experiencing pain to increase self-efficacy or the belief in their own abilities, to develop autonomy, build confidence, and essentially develop a sense of mastery over their pain. I often get asked this question: what does independence look like for a child living with pain? Well, independence can look like so many different things. So here's just some examples. It might be taking responsibility, doing something on their own, asking for help, actively making their own choices, feeling safe to stay at home on their own if they're at the right age, confidence to stay overnight at a friend's place, sleeping in their own bed at night, making their own breakfast, taking medicine, putting their clothes in the laundry or a basket. So it can look like many things. So I've been talking a lot about independence, but have you ever really stopped to think about what we mean when we say independence? Like, why do we make such a big deal about it? Independence is really synonymous with and allows space for self-reliance, autonomy, self-determination, self-expression, self-esteem and self-worth, and self-awareness. Generally, we strive for independence because it makes us feel like we have some control over our own lives. However, this is extremely variable across cultures and is impacted significantly by disability, illness, and health conditions. I think it's really important here that we check in with our own expectations and perhaps biases around the concept of independence and what we're actually striving for the young person in our lives. I mean, is anyone ever 100% independent? Should that be the goal? Is that what you want for your child? Is that what you want for yourself? I like to think about independence at the task and activity level, and I'd really encourage you to do it the same, because there's many adults in the world who might be considered independent, but can't, for example, drive a car, or they may be dyslexic and need to use a spell checker when they're writing their emails, or they may never have learned to cook and have a partner who does all the cooking. The only truly independent people would be those who live in isolation and are self-sufficient. I think what we're really striving for are these other concepts and opportunities rather than being able to do everything on our own, because we're social beings. And generally speaking, people need people. So let's just keep that in mind. So, how do we achieve these things? We need to start small, things that have less pressure or consequence and are within their capacity. For example, choosing their own clothes at the shops or online, or giving their opinion about things like what to have for dinner tonight. We need to increase demands and expectations gradually. So, having a say in decisions made about their healthcare, taking responsibility for their medications with an adult checking and monitoring. And we also need to remember that any step forward is worthy of praise and self-congratulations. Occupational therapy is therefore all about developing skills and strategies for self-management and control or agency. We don't expect a young person to go from requiring significant help to being able to manage on their own overnight or in one step. OTs help by supporting young people and families to learn how to lay down the small steps or foundations that make moving from A to B more possible. We break down the steps and the skills needed to get there, and we practice, modify, test, reflect. Like in this image, we help to lay down each piece side by side. We fill in the gaps so that when the young person is ready to walk across that bridge towards independence, they're doing it on a solid footing. And parents and families and healthcare teams and educators, we're all there providing the support needed while that bridge is being made. We are the handrail while they find their confidence and footing. And eventually they may decide they don't need that level of support anymore and can walk that path all on their own. And that would be a massive win. As an OT, I love practical takeaway strategies. So here's a few. I think some of the most powerful things parents can do are listen. When they tell you it hurts, when they tell you they want to talk about their feelings, when they're not using words but are telling you with their body language or their behavior or other means. Believe, always believe them when they say they're in pain. One of the hardest things we can experience is people not believing our truth and reality. Validate their experience. Tell them that you hear and see that they're hurting. Tell them you believe them, and validate how much it must upset them or frustrate them or disappoint them or make them angry to be feeling this way right now. Advocate. So use your voice and your parent or carer intuition to fight for the needs of your child. Gather information, consult with other people who understand pain and children, and listen to your instincts. Communicate. So model good communication skills or learn them together. Always keep your child part of the broader conversation about what's happening for them, because especially when it comes to procedures, explaining things in advance and along the way can help minimize trauma. And co-pace and co-regulate. Co-pacing means helping your child to pace themselves as they learn to understand their body and manage their symptoms and activity levels. Little ones in particular will be reliant on adults to pace them, right? And co-regulate. Little people and their adults can have big emotions about what's going on for them. And we have to help young people understand, identify, and tolerate their emotions, knowing that emotions are not good or bad and that they always change. Another practical thing is we use the just right challenge in OT to ensure that we're making progress but not pushing too hard. So we know if we push too hard, that sets up failure. We know if we don't push hard enough, we don't improve. So the just right challenge is about pushing to the edge of the comfort zone and a little bit beyond. So making sure we're focusing on small steps, not really big, giant ones. If you take nothing else away from this presentation, please remember we need to set realistic goals. They need to be broken down into manageable steps, which become mini goals along the way to achieving the main goal. If we set a goal that's too hard, or we have steps or expectations that are too big, we set young people up for that disappointment and sense of failure. And they don't need that. They need to know and see and feel that they can do things and that all the little things add up. So going from a push trike to a trike is likely manageable. Going from a trike straight to a two-wheeled pedal bike is unlikely to be realistic. Supporting and encouraging social connection is so important. We are social beings and we all need other people. We gain so much from social interactions and developing and maintaining friendships. I know that this can be extremely difficult for young people who aren't able to go to school, or for those who have severe pain and fatigue that limits their capacity for interactions with others. And for those who have fragile immune systems and being around others can be really risky. There is also those who are neurodivergent and might find the interactions and stimulation overwhelming, especially on top of pain and fatigue. However, being in relation with others is necessary for development. So emotional, social, communication, and so much more. One of the hardest parts about living with pain as a young person is feeling isolated, feeling like no one understands you or your experience, and feeling like the odd one out. Some people are bullied, either face-to-face or online. They feel shame or embarrassment. But the thing that fights back against all of these things is finding connection, finding people who truly try to understand their experience and who are accepting and show empathy is so important. I often talk to young people about friendships and sharing their experience with others and trying to work out who the right people are to share with. And I often quote Brene Brown, who asks the question, who has earned the right to hear my story? Because not everyone has, and not everyone will treat their story with the respect they deserve. So whatever we can do to foster these positive friendships and social supports is so important. As is the role of family generally, but also in the OT space. So I love reminding families that of the 168 hours we have in a week, children are supported by their family or caregivers for all 168 hours, with about 30 of those contracted out to educators for most kids. And at best, 1 hour a week with an OT, that's 0.59% of the week that we would see and work with your child and your family. And that's why it's so vital that there's carryover of skill building and implementation of strategies at home. The magic of development and growth and this journey towards independence really happens at home. In summary, I thought I'd highlight the OT role in a multidisciplinary pain team and how we fit alongside paediatric team members. You'll see here one of the many models or frames of reference that OTs use. This is the model that I prefer to practice from, the Canadian model of occupational performance and engagement. And I think it's models like this and our training that illustrates how we fit well into pain teams when we're invited in. So OTs see and hold space for a whole child. As I said in the beginning, we see a young human in the context of a family or caregiving relationship who needs and wants to do things. We see the social needs, the desire to belong. We see young people wrestling with identity, sexuality, pain, hopes, dreams. We see young people and families learning to accept the challenges they're having with pain and still wanting to learn new skills and master new tasks and be on that journey towards autonomy and self-reliance. We use occupation, those things that we want and need to do, both as therapy and as goals. We know that engaging in meaningful activities is a buffer against poorer mental health outcomes. And we know that young people moving towards their goals and becoming who they want to be is the most important thing. I hope that my OT colleagues recognise as much as I do that the struggle with pain is as much about what it stops us from doing as it is about the relentless sensation of pain. But our jobs as occupational therapists is to help kids in pain start or resume doing, being, becoming, and belonging so that they can thrive at home, school, and beyond. Thank you for having me. These are just some of the ways that people might get in touch or utilize my services. I don't currently see clients face-to-face or via Zoom, but I do provide supervision to many OTs who do.